Narcissists' most toxic and damaging form of abuse, by far.
Has this ever happened to you? You finally work up the courage to set a firm boundary with the narcissist in your life. Maybe you told your controlling boss you won't be available over the weekend, or you refused your manipulative partner's ridiculous demand. Their initial reaction seems reasonable enough, but then the punishing campaign of silent treatment, emotional neglect, and withholding begins. Suddenly, you find yourself desperately trying to make them happy again, jumping through demeaning hoops just to get a shred of their attention or approval. If this nightmarish cycle sounds familiar, then you've been ensnared by one of a narcissist's most insidious weapons, emotional withholding. It's a soul-crushing form of abuse that can erode your self-worth, your sanity, and even your will to live. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel so you don't miss future videos shining a light on these disturbing truths about narcissistic behavior. Subscribing and learning these insights can help make you immune to the narcissist's devastating emotional abuse tactics. Because make no mistake, allowing a narcissist's cycle of emotional withholding to persist is like being slowly bled dry by an emotional assassin. You simply cannot thrive or maintain your dignity when these malignant manipulators hold the cure for your deepest human needs hostage. It's psychological warfare, plain and simple.
The narcissist emotional chokehold. Narcissist's form of abuse.
At our core, humans share some fundamental longings that narcissists exploit to an extreme: the desire to feel loved, understood, valued, and like we belong. When these primal needs remain unmet, psychological distress builds, and our mental health can rapidly deteriorate. This is precisely the emotional chokehold manipulative narcissists attempt to construct around their victims. By love bombing at the start and making you feel amazing, they build up your need for their pseudo-love and approval. Then, they deliberately withhold affection, validation, intimacy, and communication as both punishments and tactics for gaining your compliance. For instance, the narcissistic wife may give her doting husband the silent treatment for days or weeks because he missed her friend's birthday party, even though she never reminded him about it. The abusive, egomaniacal coach might freeze out a talented player for insufficient hustle during a game, cultivating insecurity and submission in them. Each instance creates unbearable cravings for the narcissist's approval and connection, which the victim will go to extreme, degrading lengths to reobtain. It's psychological starvation at its most destructive. In one particularly heartbreaking case, a young woman admitted that when her narcissistic husband was withholding sex and affection for months on end, she briefly considered trying to seduce him while he slept just to experience any form of intimacy. The psychological toll of his emotional deprivation had become that damaging. This cyclical technique, when repeated over months and years, causes victims to become hopelessly trauma-bonded to their abusive partner and increasingly dependent on their erratic pseudo-love. The emotional chaos renders you feeling worthless, taken for granted, and willing to do almost anything to please them. You've been reduced to a desperate, subservient shell of your former self, with no ambitions or support system beyond your toxic captor.
Their scorched-earth separation tactics. Damaging form of abuse.
But the narcissist's abuse through emotional deprivation doesn't stop at intimacy, appreciation, and communication. These emotional piranhas also work tirelessly to alienate you from any other reliable sources of support and fulfillment in your life. The underhanded tactics they use are as multitudinous as they are pernicious, sabotaging your hobbies and passions so you lose purpose beyond appeasing them, stonewalling and freezing out your loved ones to drive a wedge in those relationships, engaging in caustic projection to turn friends and families against you, stringent financial control to block you from accessing money to regain independence, love bombing / mirroring your pals to steal them away as part of their harem of admirers, forbidding you from taking care of your physical and mental health needs. The goal is to sever your access to any hedonic rewards beyond appeasing the insatiable narcissist. They seek to become your sole custodian of positivity, joy, and validation in life. It's the equivalent of a torturous captor wantonly burning every scrap of food, water, and bedding their prisoner has while chaining them in an empty cell, except the cell is your entire life, and the narcissist is eagerly reducing it to ashes from which only they can, supposedly, rescue you. For some victims, even God and faith become inadmissible sources of comfort and hope in this bleak paradigm. The narcissist is the beginning, the middle, and the cruel end of your entire purpose for existing. One woman recalls her narcissistic husband, sneering at her Catholic beliefs, to the point she gave up church attendance, no longer able to derive peace from her spirituality. A man in a support group admitted he stopped practicing martial arts, formerly his greatest passion, after his narcissistic fiancée berated him for being a violent, angry man every time he went. By obliterating your external sources of happiness and stability this way, the narcissist can construct an emotional scorched earth around you, leaving only perpetual loneliness and suffering in their presence. And it's in this desolate, traumatized state that you become psychologically softened to their control. conditioned to tolerate the cycle of withholding affection and validation in exchange for mere crumbs of approval. It's a mental prison of epic proportions, and the saddest part is, as we'll explore, once you fall into this bleak abyss, clawing your way back out becomes exponentially more difficult.
The lasting devastation of narcissistic deprivation. Most toxic and damaging form of abuse.
Even if you heroically manage to escape the narcissist cycle of emotional withholding, the psychological corrosion and trauma don't magically wash away. Getting healthy again takes extensive time, effort, and specialized support. That's because narcissistic abuse quite literally rewires your brain's reward pathways and chips away at its self-soothing abilities. After months or years of being conditioned to hunger for their fake, intermittent approval while denying yourself any lasting gratification, your neurological landscape shifts.
Some impact survivors commonly face include
An inability to feel happiness, joy, or self-esteem, except through earning others' approval. Developing codependent tendencies by desperately seeking reassurance from new partners. Becoming needily attached, or conversely, emotionally repressed once in a healthy relationship. Engaging in self-sabotaging behaviors like affairs, quitting jobs, self-harm, etc. Sliding into alcoholism, food issues, and other self-medication to numb the trauma. Essentially, the narcissist has hollowed out your soul work much in how a scrupulous gardener pampers a bonsai tree by pruning, confining, and meticulously controlling your branches to suit their selfish whims and aesthetic. You've been abused into a living karmic prison. In the most devastating cases, the psychological scars from years of deprivation leave survivors so starved of self-worth that they resign themselves to a life of loneliness and disconnection. After their narcissistic captor made them wholly unlovable, they come to believe romantic intimacy and healthy bonds are forever out of reach. These hollow casualties wander through life like hollowed ghosts, incapable of deriving genuine joy or security from achievements, relationships, or any wholesome sources. Settling becomes their only recourse, as the narcissist has effectively killed their spirit. In truth, it's a miracle any human can withstand such prolonged and calculated erosion of their core psychological needs. Narcissists don't just go for the jugular vein, they torture their victims by dehydrating their very souls, one delicate sinew at a time.
the silent treatment's sinister effects. Narcissists' most toxic and damaging form of abuse.
While withholding intimacy and affection is damaging enough, another infliction tactic narcissists wield is the insidious silent treatment. By stonewalling you with prolonged silence, they manufacture feelings of anxiety, abandonment, and perpetual self-doubt. Maybe the narcissistic husband goes 3 days without speaking to his distraught wife after she failed to have his coffee prepared exactly as he prefers. Or the toxic boss punishes an employee by icing them out completely for a full work week simply for asking about upcoming vacation time. This deliberate, punitive, silent treatment appeals to the narcissist's intoxicating need for control. By creating a vacuum of communication, they force the suffering victim to become hyper-focused on being accepted back into their good graces. Self-blame and eroding confidence become all-consuming existential crises. One woman described how her neglectful, narcissistic mother would routinely give her the silent treatment for weeks at a stretch while she was growing up. As a helpless child, she would frantically rack her brain for what transgression could have caused this isolation and abandonment. She still carried that anxious mentality well into adulthood. And that's ultimately the narcissist's goal with these cruel, silent vigils, cementing pathological insecurity and self-doubt into your psyche. By being ambiguous about their grievances, you're left hopelessly obsessing and atoning over potential missteps, real or imagined. This warps your reality into one where simply existing carries risks of drawing their emotional abandonment and lack of empathy. Your thoughts and behavior become fanatically focused on preempting future bouts of the silent treatment, which of course is precisely what the narcissist wants as it cements their power over you. So not only does this refusal to communicate deprive you of basic intimacy and security, over time, it trains you into a debilitating pattern of people pleasing, sacrificing your self-worth in hopes of avoiding additional bouts of stonewalling judgment. Tragically, the quieter the abuser, the louder internal critical voices toward yourself become.
The only effective response, permanent, no contact. To save self from narcissist abuse.
By now, it should be abundantly clear why permanently removing these toxic emotional rapists from your life is crucial for reclaiming your humanity and restoring your sense of self-worth. There can be no half measures, no periodic check-ins or relapses of any kind. Every reassociation, no matter how minor, simply re-exposes you to their vicious trauma drums and cycle of emotional deprivation. Only by achieving permanent no contact can you finally place a tough boundary around further psychological erosion. Additionally, you'll likely require extensive counseling and reconditioning support to undo the self-hatred, neediness, codependency, and addictive approval seeking the narcissist instilled in you. Your brain's dopamine receptors have been hijacked and sabotaged. Undoing such physiological changes takes consistent work and positive reinforcement. Support groups, journaling, meditation, and other self-care strategies will be instrumental in helping you rebuild your independence, self-esteem, and ability to feel intrinsically content beyond others' validation. It's not an easy path by any means, but the alternative, remaining ensnared in the narcissist's perpetual, dehumanizing cycle of withholding love and security, equates to a slow, torturous death of your identity and spirit. Do you really want to wake up a shell of your former self at age 60, having wasted decades scrambling for crumbs of fake approval and intimacy from an individual incapable of unconditional love? Being that emotionally and psychologically bled dry is its own special form of damnation. So have the courage to break free from these psychological rapists and their inhumane campaigns of emotional deprivation. Starve them of your energy, your compliance, and your life force that they feast upon. Because in the end, the only thing more frightening than the arduous journey of reclaiming your identity should be the prospect of forever remaining under their heels as hollowed, subservient ghosts. You don't just owe it to yourself to escape, you owe it to the beautiful, vibrant, and worthy soul these narcissistic succubi have been slowly vampirizing all along. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel so you don't miss future videos shining a light on these kinds of disturbing truths about narcissistic behavior. Your subscription helps spread awareness and may make a difference for others being abused by exposing these toxic predators.